I welcome you to the third day of the ICSSR ERC sponsored International Interdisciplinary Gender Sensitization Workshop, Her Story, Past, Present and Future. Today on day 3, we will be having 2 sessions in the morning and a paper presentation and 2 sessions in the afternoon. The first speaker in the morning is Professor Gupta. She is Professor of Sanskrit, University of Calcutta. And today, Professor Gupta is going to speak on the wife in the Rig Veda.
Good morning, everybody. It's a Sunday, and everyone is here in spite of the lethargy of the last week. You can't have a lazy Sunday morning today. Sorry for that. I'm here to speak to you, speak about the wives of the Rig Veda. The wives of the Rig Veda is a topic. I don't know how much it inspires you to sit along and listen to. However, the thing is, when you speak about her story, she is at least considered, actually, she was considered herself a fully perfect and satisfied woman till she attained the wifehood, at least in the age of Rig Veda. And can you hear me clearly? I'm not sure because my
You're very clear.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. No problem.
Okay, thank you. Then, yes, what I was saying that she didn't consider herself to be a perfect human being, a complete human being, till she was married. And we find it in the literature of the women of the Rig Veda themselves. They have numerous times repeatedly urged and longed for a heroic husband and a number of sons, male offspring, to be precise. But didn't she have any other self-identity as a human being, or what position did she hold in the Rig Vedic society is the question. We have fixed the title as the wife of the Rig Veda, the wife in the Rig Veda, but the wifehood cannot be totally separated from her womanhood, as we may well understand. So it will be better to look at the woman, the female species of human being, from their own literature. And fortunately, the oldest literature of the Indo-Europeans, the Rig Veda, contains the literature, the composition of women poetesses, women poets, I should say, quite in large number. We have, according to our traditional records, at least 27 female poets in the Rig Veda, in the great collection of the Rig Veda, who are believed to have contributed to its composition. And in addition, we may find 4 more such poetesses who are not in records, but otherwise they are found to have composed the bulk of composed mantras of the Rig Veda. And among these 31 names, we cannot say that all were women of flesh and blood, as the tradition was this, that whoever is the speaker of the mantra, the verse, is considered to be the rishi or the seer or the composer of that verse. Actually, it is a revealed literature as per the traditional belief, and Rig Veda is never said to have been composed by human beings. The rishis or the poets found there are considered to be the speaker of the mantras which they saw, which were revealed to them, which were acquired by them by some divine grace. However, to be precise and to be practical for a logical understanding of nowadays, we consider these seers as the composers of those hymns and prayers and mantras. These hymns are not always the prayers, or not always the praise of the gods they are addressed to, but often they contain socio cultural material to understand the people of that time. And for the women, however, the women of the time, it is a great source of knowledge. The literature attributed to the women seers are definitely playing a great role in understanding the women of the Vedic age. Among those 31 names, as I have mentioned earlier, not all were women in flesh and blood, as I have said, that it was a custom that in whose mouth the mantra is said is believed to be its rishi, and to whom the mantra is addressed or about whom the mantra is describing was considered its deity or devata. So it is a rather technical terms, the rishi and devata. For at least the Vedic literature, the rishi could be even mantras are put in the mouth of two rivers, Vyas and Sutlej, and they're considered as rishi of those mantras. And those are dialogue hymns, conversation. You could find conversation over there between the rivers and the sage Vishwamitra. And Vishwamitra, when Vishwamitra is addressed by the rivers, is considered as the deity or the god of the mantra uttered by Vyas and Sutlej, and they are considered as rishi. So it's completely technical term. It's a completely technical term, the rishi as well as the deity. In when you are speaking about the Vedic literature. However, sometimes we find that the speaker of the mantras is Ratri, the night, or Medha, merit, the Dakshina, that is the sacrificial feast. But they cannot be human beings, so we just avoid them from our discussion. We keep them aside. But from the internal evidences of the literature, we hold at least 14 women were there who did compose hymns, who were actually women in flesh and blood. And among them, we find two names in the first book of the Rig Veda, and they are Romosha, who is held to be a queen of the king Bhavayabhya, and another is Lopamudra, the famous, the wife of the famous sage Agastya. These two hymns are conversational hymns, dialogue hymns, as they are called, and in both the places we find a dialogue between husband and wife. Now you may say that were they really husband and wife, as there is no such record contained in the material itself, like in the hymn of Romasha, that is the first women seer we meet in the Rig Veda, in the first book of Rig Veda, that is 1:126. There, in one verse, we have seer Romasha, and in the next verse, we her verse is the last one of the hymn, and before that we have another mantra, another verse uttered by a male who is supposed to be her husband. And the story narrated by the tradition is not what we actually get from the verses. The verses never say that these man and woman were actually husband and wife, but the intimate conversation retained in those couplet of verses suggest that they are very intimate people and they should be husband and wife. And since the hymn is attributed to the king Bhavayavya and his gifts he made to sage, and these things made the traditionalists, the traditional recorders, accept that the last couplet were composed by was a dialogue between the royal couple. But if we look intensely at the couplet, then we'll find that something is missing there, since the man is being allured by the woman as she's saying that you don't consider myself as a little girl. I have pubic hair, and you may well feel it. I'm as hairy as you of the Gandhara. This is what exactly she says. You might be surprised that in a religious book like Rig Veda, such words may be found. Yes, not only here, throughout the Rig Veda, especially in the hymns attributed to the female poets, they are marked with such frank pronunciation, and they are so vividly expressing their wish for conjugal life, for sexual union, and even they describe their own physique as well. They appreciate the physique of their male partner. They're quite shocking, maybe quite shocking for the purists of these days, but we cannot help revealing the truth. It's there in the printed version of the Rig Veda, and there are numerous good translations. You may find yourself that what actually the women poets have said in their poetry. However, this is a very remarkable characteristic of the literature of women, where they have expressed their whatever their wishes and their feelings for the conjugal life and others, whatever. In the hymn of Romasha and Bhava, there what we find, that is Romasha is saying that Upopame Paramrisha, come close and grasp me tight, hold me tight. Mame the Brahni Manyatha, don't consider myself a little girl. Sarvaham Asmi Romasha, I am heavy all over my body. Gandharinam Ivavika, like the you of the Gandhara. There, no mention of her husband or anything is found. Instead, we find a girl describing her youth to attract the male whom she is talking towards her. It seems that they don't know each other, and the man particularly in question doesn't know her intimately, and that's why she has to describe her youth in this way. And in reply, the man again says something that is also very private conversation, and it shows that she has gone through with a relationship, gone through a relationship with that girl, and is quite satisfied. 1 minute, please. Sorry. What I was telling you, that that she was quite successful in satisfying the person she was talking to. In the next hymn, where we find another male, another female poet. One second. Another hymn is 179. That is a dialogue hymn between Agastya and Lopamudra. There we find two verses attributed to Lopamudra, the wife of the sage Agastya, where she says, that is very interesting for our topic today. She's saying that many months and years have passed, and I'm getting old day by day. With every morning, I'm getting old, and my beauty, my youth is wearing off. I'm getting older every day, and now it's time that the husband should approach the wife. In two verses, she invites her husband Agastya, and in the third and fourth verse of the hymn, her husband replies, and the union, the conjugal union, happens. It is understood from their words. It is interesting to note that Agastya is hailed as a very a sage, a seer of high esteem. Even we get a verse attributed to a female poet who is known as the sister of Agastya. No name for her is retained in the literature, in the tradition, but she is known as the sister of Agastya, Agastya Swasa. Such was the glory of Agastya. This Agastya, sage Agastya, was practicing penance for long, though he was married, and Lopamudra was his wife, as the story is narrated in details in later Puranas and also in Mahabharata. But we get the seeds of those stories in the Vedic literature. There we find that Lopamudra complains that she has got older, but not approached. She has not known the conjugal love so far. She says that I have been toiling day and night. The time has tearing my beauty and youth of me, and now it should be the time that the husband approaches the wife. This dialogue contains a rather intense private conversation, I should say, quite interesting in its from many aspects. And nowadays, the present scholars find a very strong sexual depiction inside in the internal evidences of these verses. However, the conjugal relationship did matter much to the wives of even the seers of the Rig Veda, the sages. The sages were not, they didn't live a celibate life. Sages were not believed to be, they didn't have to be celibate. They did marry, they had conjugal relations, they had offspring, and they lived a life of a normal grihastha. You see, grihastha means a person who runs a household and does the duties of a householder. Together with the wife, the griha, the house was complete. And the term for griha was dhamma in the Vedic language. And you know the word dampati for the married couple, even nowadays it is in vogue in many Indian languages. Dampati means the husband and wife. It literally means the two uh, lords of the house. Pati means master or lord, uh, and Dhamapati, it ended in double ending and dual ending. Dual ending, it means that those were equally treated, those were treated the equal owner of the household. Dhamasya Pati, the two masters of the house. And a Vedic man could not perform any sacrificial ritual until he got married. When he wedded, when he got married, only then he attained the right to practice the sacrifices, to arrange for sacrifices and perform sacrificial rituals. And it was not that the man could alone perform the sacrificial ritual even he was married. He was to perform the rituals with his wife always. And that's why the term patni used for the wife means the wife who assists her husband in all sacrificial rituals. Paturno Yajna Sangyoge is a formula, a grammatical formula given by Panini, where he explains that the term pati in feminine, it becomes patni only when the wife is eligible to perform the sacrifice along with her husband. There could be several wives who were not considered to be eligible to perform sacrifices along with their husbands. There were the Varna Vyavastha, that is the Varna system, and there you find Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and for Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, these three Varna, the people from three Varnas could perform sacrifice, and among them, the first Varna, Brahmana, could marry at least wives from rest of the from his Varna as well and from rest of the three Varnas. But all of them, all of the wives could not perform sacrifice with their husband. It was scheduled that which wife belonging to which Varna could be able to could be performing the sacrifice. They are not all considered to be patni, but the female, the feminine gender of pati is pati again, and not patni always. Patni particularly meant that wife would practice sacrifice. I think I have made it clear. The point is clear to you. Now, not only perform the sacrificial rituals, the women of the Rig Veda, as we find them from their own literature, they almost all of them wished strongly for a marriage, happy marriage, for a faithful and caring husband who is heroic, and they also longed for several heroic sons. As it is evident from the marriage hymn of the Rig Veda, that famous marriage hymn of which we get many verses still in vogue, used in the marriage rituals of the Hindus. There, the hymn is attributed to Surya Savitri. Surya Savitri is held to be the composer of that hymn. She is a female poet, and she has described her own marriage with Soma in that beautiful hymn that is quite long, with 47 verses. However, there we find that the wife of the Veda was not a child. There was no child marriage. The girl being married to a man is a fully grown up person, and usually it happened that Swayamvara was arranged that they chose their own they chose their husband themselves. That is called Swayamvara. It was quite in vogue. There was even contractual marriages, and as we find in the dialogue hymn of Urvashi and Pururavas, we find the mention of contractual marriage. Urvashi married. Urvashi was a nymph, and her abode was the heaven. But she fell in love with the mortal king Pururavas, and they got married. But Urvashi imposed two conditions: that she would leave Pururavas at once if two of the conditions were broken by him. And after they were living happily for quite some time, the Gandharvas, the demigods in the heaven, they thought that it is time that Urvashi should come back to us. And they made a plan by which Pururavas had to break his promises, and the promise being broken, Urvashi instantly vanished. And Pururavas tried to find out Urvashi, and he wandered like a mad person from here to there, and finally he found her in a Manasa. Manasa, that is the Manas Sarovar in the north. And when he begged much Urvashi to come back to him, Urvashi said, "You see, I performed every duty of a wife. I did serve your parents. I ate very little when I was with you, and I allowed you. I gave you sexual pleasure thrice a day. So I did everything a good wife would do, but you failed to keep your promise. So there is no question of going back to you. If Pururavas, you please go back." So this is what we find there, even when we find another girl, olden maiden, Kosha. She is held as to be 60 years old in her father's house, remained unmarried, and she prayed for marriage to her heroic husband, to her gods Ashwins, the 12 deity. And she prayed in such a sentimental tone that, "Oh Ashwins, oh my God, I do not know what is the conjugal love, what the conjugal love means. I don't know the love where the man cries for the ailing wife and takes her to many places to get her cured. I do want to know that love. You Ashwins give me that pleasure." This is prayer she makes to her gods. So it is evident that there were girls who longed deeply for a happy married life, wanted really to get married and be a good wife to their husbands. Still, we find even cases like Urvashi and other cases like Apala. Apala is another maiden she is spoken to. She must be a teenager girl who was afraid to get married, and at her puberty, she invoked Indra, and she is recorded as Patidvish in her own poetry. Patidvish means a girl who hates to have a husband. So there were even girls like her, Apala, and everywhere in Apala's hymn, we find the use of plural number. She says that we are Patidvisha, that we are the haters of husbands. So it may be assumed that she was not alone. There were girls like her who were not interested in getting married. They remained single, and that tradition, and when remaining single, they even invoked gods to be their consort. As in later Bhakti Yug, We find Mirabai, who just deplored having her mortal husband, and she left him, and instead she chose Krishna as her consort. Uh, a hypothesis is there that in the hymn of Apala, you find the seed of that Mirabai of later ages prevailing in the early Vedic age. And besides these girls, some of whom were longing for having husbands, there were even girls who did not bother for having uh, or getting married at all. Like we get the most beautiful poetry of Vak Ambrini, where she praises herself. And she says there that it is me who is the supreme being. I am who I am the one who gives birth to the to my father. This is some mystic. There is some mystic elements in her poetry, but still there are some words that can be interesting for our topic. In a verse, she says, "Young kamae tang tam ugrang prinomi." Whomever I desire, I make him mighty. I make him the seer of things. I make him the meritorious. It is me who make her consort her own way. Whatever she likes, she makes her man that kind. This is something very bold and a very bold expression. There is a question I couldn't go through. However, some time is kept for question answer session. There, I'll try to answer your questions. But this is a vast topic indeed. And for the wise, there's so myriad kinds of women found in the literature of the Rig Veda, not only in the literature of the women poets, but there are mentions of wives, very worthy wives of kings, who even fought with their husbands in the battlefield. We get the mention of Vishpala. Vishpala was a warrior herself, and she went to the battlefield with her husband where she lost her thigh, and Ashwins were invoked who gave her artificial limbs. And there is also Mudgalani. She was also a queen who went to the warfield with her husband. And there are mentions of the Dasa Kanyas, Dasa tribes who had women as their warrior. But warrior women were not uh, very unreal for the Vedic Aryans, as well as we find mentions of Mudgalani and Vishpala. And there is also a hymn by Indrani. Indrani says that that is a very interesting hymn. Indrani is attributed as many as 3 hymns in the Rig Veda. There, 2 complementary hymns are there. One is Sapatni Nashana hymn, that is the removal of the wife. In one hymn, she just practices black magic to get rid of her wives. That is Sapatni Nashana. Sapatni is wife. And in another hymn, she expresses her glory and her glory as a wife, a ruling wife over her husband. There she says that there is no one like me who reigns over her husband, who makes her husband satisfied in every respect, and I am so successful. I have a daughter who is a reigning queen and a son who is a hero. You find she is a complete picture, complete satisfied wife of the Rig Veda, who can boast of her being a very successful wife in every respect. We get another hymn, a dialogue hymn, a conversation uh, between Indra, Indrani, and one of Indra's devotee, that is Rishakapi, in the 10th mandala, 10th book of the Rig Veda. There it is a very curious hymn because most of its language is almost obscure and it is very difficult to understand what it wants to say, but it is quite a long hymn with many references that is useful for the researchers. However, the main idea is that Indra and Indrani both were having an argument over Rishakapi. Rishakapi was a devotee of Indra or a friend of his whom Indrani couldn't stand. He just despised Rishakapi, and she was asking Indra to get rid of Rishakapi, to bid farewell to Rishakapi, as she couldn't tolerate him. She is annoyed with Rishakapi's approach. And at the end of the hymn, we find that Indra had to bid goodbye to his friend Rishakapi. Even he said, please go to your questions after. I'll discuss the questions after my session is over. And I have, I think, 5 to 7 minutes more to talk. So I would like to give some more data about the wife of the Rig Veda. So Indrani, she was actually reigning over her husband, and Indra tried to say that I love Rishakapi too much. I don't enjoy without him. But Indrani was very firm with her conviction that no, you must get rid of him. And finally, Indra had to surrender. In another hymn that is also in the 10th mandala of Rig Veda, the first and the 10th book of the Rig Veda are considered to be comparatively later composition, and we find most of the female seers in these two books, in these two chapters of the Rig Veda. In the 10th chapter, we find another woman. She is called the wife of Vasukra. Her name is not retained, but she is known as the wife of Vasukra, and Vasukra is said to be the son of Indra. In a single verse, Indrani says that Vasukra Patni, that is the wife of Vasukra, she says that she has arranged for a party, yajna, sacrificial, and a sacrifice that is in her sacrificial ceremony. Many persons were invited and everyone came, but her father-in-law Indra didn't come. She was actually expressing her frustration that everyone came, only my father-in-law didn't come. He could have come. He could have eaten the cakes and drink the soma juice and could be happy, but he didn't come. Here we find a typical housewife who is the mistress of the household, and she is the hostess of the party, and she laments that each guest came with her except her own father-in-law. And we find there so many women who are wives of a particular king or sages, seers. One thing is that what I must now sum it up, what I have said so far, that the women of the Rig Veda were very keen in having a family life. They were very desirous to have strong and heroic husbands, and they did want to get married and give birth to many offspring, especially male children, since at that time physically they were not that much secure till they were protected by their husband and sons. That was a basic need for the women folk of the Rig Veda, as well as for their religious life, they needed a husband, and as for their sustenance, they needed a husband. But there were even girls at that time who didn't care for having a family, who even could uh, dare to uh, come out of the marriage bond, and they could live on their own. And some of them had a higher quest for philosophy and knowledge. And so all the girls in the Rigvedic time, at least, they were divided into two groups. One is Sadyodvaha, that is the girl, a woman who was married, was given to marriage, and the other was Brahmavadini, who lived a celibate life and pursued their studies in the Vedas. Uh, I'm sorry, I should get my other my phone. Yes. Um, now, I may have left many points. I don't remember right now. But from your questions, as I have overlooked, I have glad chance to come some points, that there will be some more points to discuss, depending based on the questions you have already put forward. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, uh, for your interesting lecture and taking us back to the women of the Rigvedic period. As I can see, ma'am, there are quite a lot of questions. So can I take them up one by one? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I'll start from the beginning. Ma'am, the first question is from Prarthana Agarwal. Altruism and sacrifice are closely associated with women, not only in India, but across the globe. Is it biological or cultural?
I think both. Both are the reasons for this altruism and sacrifices are so close, because biologically, women are the givers. They give birth to children. They are the nurses. They nurse their children. They feed them. Not they only feed their children, but they also feed the whole household. From prehistoric times, it was the duty of the women to divide the food, whatever the male uh, male uh, uh, male uh, men used to bring from hunting and uh, other sources. They used to divide the food into the members of their group, and it was inherited by their next their future generations, and it came to them as natural the as they give birth to children and their urge to get married. You cannot say that these are not something which the culture, a particular culture, imposed upon women, that you have to be like this. There are always exceptions, and so there are exceptions, as we find that even in the age of the Vedas, there were women who didn't go for a family life, who remained celibate, and they just remained single. And in prehistoric times, as the Mahabharata records, that there was no system of marriage. It was a permissive society, and any man could inhabit with any woman. But later it was decided that one woman should have a man as her husband. But it was not that hard and fast rule that she had to be chaste all the time. In earlier times, she had to be faithful to her husband only during her course of menstruation. That the child born might inherit the father's blood, her husband's blood. During other times, she was free to mate with other people. And it was somewhat accepted by the Rigvedic people, as it is written from the literature, the word jara, standing for the paramour, is so common in the Vedic literature. It is used profusely in similes and to describe other things. We even hear Aditi, the mother of all gods. She is invoked by the mother of Vamadeva, the seer Vamadeva. When pregnant, the uh, mother of Vamadeva, she was having a problem with her uh, with the birth of her child, because the child in her womb, he refused to be born in the natural way. He insisted to be born from his mother's side. Being afraid, the mother, would-be mother, prayed to Aditi, and Aditi, along with her son Indra, came there to convince the child inside the womb that he should be born in the normal way. However, there Aditi is hard to say. She is speaking that she is told that avadyam iva manya mana mata indrang guhakam. That means the mother thought Indra as a sin, and she hid him as soon as he was born. There is a faint suggestion of illicit child, and it was accepted in the Vedic society that such cases were there, paramours were there, and illicit childbirth were there. But still, they insisted on having a legitimate husband, legitimate child, and so they could perform the religious sacrifices together for the improvement, for the prosperity of their progeny, the family line. And that is what I would like to say, that by biological um, mm, by biological reasons, for biological reasons, and for cultural reasons, they are very closely associated, altruism and sacrifice. They are not meant for some personal, very personal gain, but meant for the welfare of others as well. The next question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your answer. The next question is from Dr. Shushmita Brahma. Why a woman who had a respectable and equal status in marriage at that time now needs laws for protection and equal status? Why and when did her status deteriorate?
This is a long, this requires a long answer, because your question demands a study, a diachronic study, which should cover at least 2,500 years, if not more. And the steps that women have come through, at least for their rights and legal positions, legal rights and other things, financial rights, financial freedom, everything. There were laws in the ancient time. You know, the Vedas were considered as the constitution of that time, of the community, the Vedic community. For long, they had the Vedas as their constitution, and as the constitution shouldn't be challenged, so it was held that the Vedas are not composed by human beings; they are revealed, and they are the words of God, so that all people should abide by the laws the Vedas provide. And that's why, since time immemorial, the weaker sex, that is the women, they needed protection from the lawmakers, and they somewhat they were protected, but sometimes they had to pay their freedom for their protection, for their protection, biological protection. They had to surrender their freedom of speech, and they had to get married very early. But you should know that there was no child marriage in the Rig Veda, as I have already mentioned, and there was no burning of widows in the Vedas, in the time of the Vedas. It was all later development and shouldn't be connected with the Vedic religion itself. They somehow they found their ground. The later Smriti makers, lawmakers, somehow they related it with the words of the Vedas. As the Vedas are in obscure language, they are very archaic. It's very difficult to discern its original meaning. So, there are even verses of the Vedas which two fighting parties are using as their authoritative statement from the Vedas. The king who hold that the girl child should be deprived of their paternal property, they produce as their support the Vedic mantra. The same mantra is used by those their opponent party who say that no, the girl child should have a legitimate right over their paternal property. Two opposite parties use the same Vedic verse as their supporting authority. So this is very hazy, and you do not know during various time people use them as their own way, in their own way to support their own view of that time. But it is really a point to be noted that since time immemorial, the weaker sex needed protection from law to get their physical protection, their security, sustenance, and every other thing.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Shushmita Goswami. She asks, could you please say something about the condition of general women of the Rigvedic period?
General women was quite free. Actually, the women of later Vedic period, they were not that fortunate like their former sisters of the Rigvedic time. The girls of the Rig Veda, though not that much wanted like their brothers, but still, when born in the family, they were treated with love and care. They were given some education, as it is evident from the hymns they composed. They knew the history, the mythology, and they had some mastery over the meters and prosody, and they mastered the art of composing hymns as well. That means that they were quite educated, and a subject they used to learn was they were taught in various subjects. I have discussed them in details in my book, Women's Years of Rig Veda, and I have little time to go in detail about that. But in short, in one line, I must say that they were educated. They could select their own husband, and they were not married as a child. They were not burnt when they lost their husband. They could express their physical desire boldly, which is not seen later in the literature of the later women, even of the Vedic women. They could be, live a life of learned woman. They could spend their life in learning and teaching. But the only things, in every sense, they had a held esteem. They had their head held high in self-respect, as we find from the hymns of Indrani, Vak, Urvashi, Apala. But the thing is, they had to suffer the lot of polygamy of that age. Though the normal trend, general trend of the society was monogamous, one man had one wife generally, but the royal people and the priest class had many wives, and you may understand the educated, the respectful women had to tolerate, had to go through the pain of having wives, to have to share their the confidence, the faith of their loyalty of their husbands with other women. That was painful for them. That's why the royal woman like Indrani had to compose Sapatni Nashana hymn I mentioned earlier in my lecture. And that's all I think in short.
Thank you, ma'am. Since we don't have a lot of time, I'll just take up one or two more questions. Okay. So there's a question by Payal Rai. Can you please elaborate more on the point of Brahmavadini?
Yes, Brahma, technically the word Brahma at the time of Rig Veda meant the Vedic verses. Brahmavadini, whoever, the girl who speaks, who utters a Brahma, a Vedic verse, herself, a Vedic verse is revealed to a girl is called Brahmavadini. The girl who used to practice and in the studies of the Vedas were called Brahmavadini. So they often remained single and they practiced, they studied all through their lives and they lived a celibate life in general. That's what is called Brahmavadini. But truly speaking, the women seers are all Brahmavadinis according to its derivational meaning, a derivation that they compose Vedic verses. Therefore, Indrani is also a Brahmavadini, so is Romasha, so is Lopamudra. But we find them to have husbands and they are longing for a family life and heroic husbands. So, in that sense, they are Sadyodvaha, but they will be treated technically as Brahmavadini as they uttered Vedic verses on their own. So this is the technical meaning. But later on, those girls who led a celibate life and remained single and spent their life in studying Vedas and other Shastras were called Brahmavadini.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll take just one last quick question. It is, the Manusmriti offers many preachers on morality. How much does it justify the position of women or their rights?
In fact, the morality imposed on women are nothing to restrict the men. It is generally held by the ancient Smritikaras that men by nature are unfaithful. They are likely to go from women to women. It is the frivolity is it belongs to men, the species of men. Still, they were to make their points clear that the child is born, which will inherit their property and family name as well, should be of their own seed. And that's why these impositions, the moral impositions, are so strict for women to secure their progeny to be carrying their blood and not from others. And that's why we hear prayers of the rishis in the Vedas, Manah Kshetre Parabijani Avapsu. May not the seeds of other people be thrown in the fields of ours. That is the concern of the lawmakers and the patriarch society.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering the questions so nicely, carefully, and minutely. We've come to the end of this session with you. So on behalf of the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, I take this opportunity to thank you once again for joining us this morning. And we hope to have you in future also, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind patience.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.